Hello everyone. Right, I wonder how the Kohberger is innocent crew are going to explain this one, because in my opinion this one is another slam dunk. Let me explain. So we know that Brian Kohberger has recently entered his alibi. I mean, we knew this already. We've just had a little bit more detail on this alibi stuff in recent days. Brian was apparently out driving the night of the murders, so he can explain why he was out and about, because he likes to go driving at night. He goes stargazing, looking at the moon and the stars and taking photos. All right, well, it happened to be cloudy, overcast on the night of the 12th into the 13th of November 2022. But that's not why I'm here. We're here to talk about DNA. There's that little piece of DNA on the button, the clasp of the Kohberger knife sheath that was left under Maddie Morgan's body. Okay. Well, people have said, well, it could be transferred DNA, it could be planted DNA, it could have been planted. So someone has got Kohberger's DNA. How have they managed to get that? Like, swabbed his cheeks, rubbed his hands. What? That's an unlikely event, isn't it? Because unless you keep DNA in a completely sterile environment, it starts to degrade. But how much and the speed of its degrading can be measured and is known about. So it was actually this post here in the Idaho 4 subreddit that got me thinking about this. The brass sheath button. When was the DNA deposited? So this person posted about the possible significance of brass, because the little clasp is made of brass. DNA persistence on metal surfaces varies greatly. It's relatively stable on stainless steel or lead, but much less stable on copper, zinc, and their alloys. So brass is a copper alloy, isn't it? Right. That's because materials like copper and zinc, etc., degrade DNA. Recent studies suggest DNA shows significant degradation on brass in 8 to 12 hours. While this period could be variable, if we use this, then Kohberger's DNA had to be deposited on the sheath button on the evening of November 12th, or most likely the complete DNA profile recovered in the early morning of November 13th. Well, that's not right, no. So this gave me the idea to look into this further. The time's off here, and I'll explain why. But we've also got secondary transfer as well. Secondary transfer, you're talking about, friction, things just rubbing off very easily. So unless somebody managed to harvest Kohberger's DNA and keep it in a sterile environment and then add it onto the Kohberger knife sheath and then go and murder 4 people whilst framing Kohberger for it. Right, you've been watching too many movies if you believe that. But let's stick with the science. Now, on this paper here, this is a paper which gave me an interesting table. All right, brass. We don't need to worry about cell-free DNA. We're talking about cellular DNA. Maximum of 12 hours for an actual profile of DNA to be able to be taken from an object, an item made of brass due to the aforementioned oxidative issues. Right, cool. This is where this Redditor went a bit wrong. Because if we go to the PCA, we know Xana was alive and well at 4:12. We think that the murders occurred shortly after 4:12 or thereabouts. Let's call it 4:15. 4:15 in the AM of November 13th. Remember that the 911 call wasn't made until about noon. So the DNA that was later found on the brass knife sheath clasp was already 8 hours old. So we go to the PCA right at the beginning. The below information is provided by Brett Payne, who was duly appointed, blah, 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 blah. On November 13th at approximately 4 p.m. So we're now right at the 12-hour mark, almost. Moscow Police Department, Sergeant Blaker and I responded to 1122 King Road, Moscow, Idaho. Okay. Upon our arrival, the Idaho State Police Forensic Team was on scene and was preparing to begin processing the scene. So at 4 p.m, they were only just beginning to process the scene. They don't tell us in the PCA how much later the knife sheath was found. Brett Payne says, as I entered this bedroom, I could see 2 females in the single bed in the room. Both Kaylee and Maddie were deceased with visible stab wounds. Also later noticed what appeared to be a tan leather knife sheath lying on the bed. The sheath was later processed, and the Idaho State Lab later located a single source of male DNA left on the button snap of the knife sheath. So at least 12 hours before that knife sheath was even found. You know, maybe it was swabbed for DNA at the scene, put into an evidence bag, and there you go. That's a massive mistake, isn't it? We've always known that that was a massive mistake, unless it was planted. Now, Kohberger was out driving around on his own, wasn't he? So when did this person who was framing Kohberger actually collect the DNA that right at the time of the murders, it had to be done right at the time of the murders, that they'd put this planted DNA onto the clasp. So you'd have to do it right at the time of the murders. So as well as murdering 4 people, you're going to frame Kohberger for it, because you had to do it right then, or else that DNA would have degraded so much they wouldn't have even been able to get a partial profile from it. As it was, we know it was like 5 octillion bazillion likelihood to be Kohberger's DNA, so it had to be a full profile. Because remember, you know, Kohberger wasn't available that night because he was out and about driving on his own, wasn't he? Okay. Anyway, let me know what you think. I'll see you in the next video. Noodle, come on. Good boy. Okay, too.